On March 3, 2025, a gray Camry pulled into my shop just after lunch, and the owner was already apologetic before he even stepped out of the car. He had done everything right. He had researched the service interval, bought the correct Toyota WS fluid, gone to a reputable shop, and paid for a proper transmission drain and fill. 3 days later, his transmission was hunting between gears, clunking on cold starts, and hesitating every time he merged onto the highway. He was convinced the shop had used the wrong fluid. He was wrong. The fluid was perfect. The problem was something nobody had warned him about, something so simple it takes less than 10 minutes to fix, and something that, if ignored, can make a freshly serviced Toyota transmission feel worse than it did before you ever touched it. Today, I am going to show you exactly what that problem is, why it happens specifically with Toyota transmissions, and the precise reset procedure you must perform after any fluid change to protect your gearbox and restore smooth shifting. I have seen this scenario more times than I can count. A Toyota owner does the right thing. They change the fluid at the right mileage, use the correct specification, and drive away expecting improvement. Instead, the transmission behaves strangely. Shifts feel different, sometimes harder, sometimes slower. Sometimes the gearbox seems confused, holding gears too long or dropping out of lockup unpredictably. And the owner blames the service itself. But here is what almost nobody explains. Toyota transmissions are not passive mechanical devices waiting to be told what to do. They are adaptive systems. They think. They learn. They build a model of your driving behavior over thousands of miles and use that model to decide exactly when to shift, how firmly to apply clutches, and how aggressively to lock the torque converter. That model lives inside the transmission control module as learned data. And when you change the fluid, you change the physical behavior of the transmission without updating the model. The TCM is still trying to control a transmission that no longer behaves the way its memory says it should. That mismatch is the problem. And until you perform the correct reset, that mismatch will not go away on its own. Here is the uncomfortable reality most transmission shops never mention. Fresh Toyota WS fluid behaves differently than degraded fluid. It flows better, it provides more consistent hydraulic pressure, and it allows clutch packs to engage with slightly different characteristics than the worn fluid the TCM had adapted to over years of use. The TCM spent months, sometimes years, learning exactly how much pressure was needed to make smooth shifts with old fluid. Now the fluid is new. Everything changed, but the TCM still thinks it is working with old fluid, so it compensates incorrectly. The clutches apply too hard or too soft. Shift timing is off. The torque converter lockup behavior feels wrong, and the owner who just spent money on a service meant to improve their car is now driving something that feels worse. That is why the reset matters. Not as a trick, not as a workaround. It is a required part of the service that almost nobody performs. I have been working on Toyotas for over 2 decades, and I can tell you that this adaptive learning issue is one of the most misunderstood aspects of modern Toyota drivability. The transmissions in the Camry, Corolla, RAV4, Highlander, Tacoma, and almost every other current Toyota model use electronically controlled adaptive shift logic. It is genuinely sophisticated engineering. In normal operation, it is what makes these transmissions feel smooth and effortless. In a post-service situation without a reset, it is what makes them feel broken. The Transmission Control Module, TCM, stores long-term adaptive values in non-volatile memory. That means they survive power cycles. Disconnecting the battery alone will not fully clear them. The information is preserved specifically so that your driving preferences are not erased every time the car sits overnight. That is normally a feature. After a fluid change, it becomes a liability. You need a targeted reset, not a power cycle. And once you understand what that reset does and why Toyota designed the system this way, you will never perform or authorize a transmission fluid service without it again. What makes Toyota's situation unique compared to other manufacturers is the fluid itself. Toyota WS Fluid, which stands for World Standard, is not a conventional automatic transmission fluid. It is a low-viscosity synthetic designed for a very specific friction coefficient across a very specific temperature range. When Toyota calibrated the shift programming for their transmissions, they calibrated it around the behavior of WS fluid. Fresh WS fluid has a tightly controlled friction modifier package. As the fluid ages, those friction modifiers deplete. The clutch engagement characteristics change slowly over time. The transmission control module adapts to those changes incrementally, making tiny adaptive adjustments that accumulate into a comprehensive picture of how the transmission currently behaves. When you replace that aged fluid with fresh WS fluid, you do not just restore the fluid. You restore the original friction characteristics the transmission was designed for. But the transmission control module has spent years compensating away from those original characteristics. Its adaptive memory is the opposite of fresh fluid. The result is a system fighting itself. This is not a design flaw. Toyota engineers know this happens. The reset procedure exists for exactly this reason. The problem is that transmission service procedures are often communicated as fluid service alone without the equally critical post-service recalibration. Technicians who focus purely on fluid exchange complete the mechanical task correctly and miss the electronic task entirely. The car leaves the shop with perfect fluid and corrupted adaptive data. Now let us talk about what the reset actually does and how to perform it correctly. There are two methods, and choosing the right one depends on what tools you have available. The first method is the dealer-level reset using a Toyota TechStream scan tool or a compatible professional diagnostic interface. If you have access to this tool or you are working with a shop that does, this is the cleanest approach. In TechStream, navigate to the transmission control system. Open the utility functions and select the Clear Adaptive Values option. This wipes the transmission control module memory completely and returns the adaptive settings to factory default. When the car restarts, the transmission control module begins building a new adaptive profile from scratch, using fresh fluid as its baseline. The result is a transmission that relearns correctly, settling into smooth, accurate shifting within a few hundred miles of normal driving. If you are having a dealership perform the fluid service, ask specifically for the adaptive value reset. Many Toyota technicians will know what you mean. If they seem unsure, ask them to perform a TCM memory initialization through TechStream. That is the correct terminology. The second method is accessible without dealer tools, and it is what I walk customers through when they handle this themselves. It requires a compatible OBD2 scan tool capable of accessing transmission data and clearing adaptive memory. Several affordable options work well. Think Diag, Autel, and Launch brand scanners in the mid-price range can access Toyota transmission adaptations on most models from 2007 onward. Connect the tool with the engine warmed up, navigate to the transmission module, locate the learned value or adaptive data section, and clear it. Some interfaces label this function as initialization, some call it reset, and some call it clear shift adaptation. They all accomplish the same thing. The key is confirming the tool can reach the transmission control module directly, not just generic OBD2 data, because generic data will not give you access to adaptive memory. Toyota service literature calls this the pattern clear procedure for some models. There is also a driving procedure that functions as a manual relearn reset, though it is less complete than a full electronic clear. Begin with the engine fully warmed up and the vehicle on a safe, empty road. Shift into manual mode if available, or allow the transmission to operate in its normal drive range. Then perform a series of moderate, controlled accelerations, allowing the transmission to cycle through each gear cleanly without aggressive throttle. Follow this with slow city driving, light highway cruising, and several gentle decelerations with engine braking. The goal is not to stress the system, but to give the transmission control module, TCM, clean, consistent data to build a new adaptive profile from. This method works, but it takes longer, typically several hundred miles, and it starts from the existing corrupted baseline rather than a true factory reset. For best results, combine the electronic clear with the relearn drive. Now, I want to address the question I hear every time this topic comes up. If you never do this reset, will the transmission just adapt on its own eventually? The answer is technically yes, but the full picture is more complicated. The transmission control module will adapt to the new fluid over time. The question is what the transmission experiences during that adaptation period and whether any harm accumulates along the way. Fresh fluid with incorrect adaptive pressure can cause clutch packs to engage harder or softer than intended. Repeated incorrect engagement contributes to friction material wear. Torque converter lockup cycling under incorrect conditions generates additional heat. Over hundreds of miles without correction, a transmission that is shifting improperly because a reset was missed is not just uncomfortable. It is accumulating wear it should never have to experience. The reset is not just about driving feel, it is about protecting the hardware that the fluid service was supposed to protect in the first place. The Camry owner I mentioned at the start of this video did not have a damaged transmission. He had a confused transmission control module and a perfect fluid underneath it. After the reset procedure, his car drove exactly as it should have driven the day after the service. Smooth, confident shifts, clean torque converter lockup at highway speed, no clunking on cold starts. The entire character of the transmission changed in under 10 minutes without touching a single mechanical component. That is the moment I try to create for every Toyota owner who comes through my bay with post-service transmission behavior. Here is the truth that should permanently change how you approach any Toyota transmission service. The fluid is half the job. The reset is the other half. One without the other is incomplete, and incomplete is what leads people back to the shop convinced something went wrong when the real issue was something that was never done. Let me give you the specific reset timing so this is completely clear. Perform the adaptive value clear after every drain and fill service. Perform it after any transmission repair that involves fluid changes. Perform it after a battery replacement if the vehicle showed any shift quality issues beforehand. Perform it if the transmission feels off after an extended period of very short trips or extreme cold that altered driving patterns significantly. Do not perform it randomly, hoping to improve a transmission that has no service history or known fluid condition. A reset without proper fluid is not helpful. The reset is designed to be paired with clean, correct fluid, not used as a substitute for it. One more thing worth understanding is which Toyota models and years are most sensitive to this procedure. Vehicles equipped with the Toyota U660E, U760E, and the later direct shift continuously variable transmission units are particularly responsive to adaptive reset after fluid service. The Camry from 2007 onward, the RAV4 from 2009 onward, the Highlander, the Venza, and the Avalon all use variants of these transmissions. The Tacoma and Tundra, with the A750 and AB60 series transmissions, also benefit from this procedure. If your Toyota has an electronically controlled automatic or continuously variable transmission and it has had fluid service without a reset, the procedure is still worth performing even weeks after the service. The transmission control module will accept the clear and begin relearning from whatever fluid condition currently exists. The deeper principle here is one I find myself explaining more often as cars become more sophisticated. Modern vehicles do not respond to maintenance the way older vehicles did. You cannot treat them purely as mechanical systems and expect optimal results. They are electromechanical systems. The mechanical work and the electronic calibration must both be correct for the vehicle to behave correctly. A transmission fluid change that ignores the transmission control module adaptive memory is like updating the hardware in a computer without updating the software. The hardware is new. The software is still compensating for old hardware. The system does not perform correctly until both sides of the equation match. This is why the most knowledgeable Toyota shops, the ones with low comebacks and high customer satisfaction, treat the adaptive reset as a standard line item on any transmission fluid service. Not an upsell, not an optional addition. A required step that completes the service correctly. The shops that skip it are not necessarily dishonest. They may simply be doing things the way transmission service was done before adaptive learning became universal in modern vehicles. But the technology changed, and the service procedure needs to reflect that change. Before you schedule your next Toyota transmission service, or before you perform one yourself, ask one simple question. Will the adaptive values be cleared after the fluid change? If the answer is yes, you are working with someone who understands the full scope of what the service requires. If the answer is silence, confusion, or a dismissal, you now know more than they do about what your transmission actually needs. Your Toyota is one of the most reliable vehicles ever engineered. The transmission inside it is a precision adaptive system designed to last hundreds of thousands of miles. Give it the fluid it needs. Give it the reset it deserves. And it will reward you with smooth, confident performance for far longer than most people believe is possible. If this changed how you'll approach your next Toyota service, hit like so other owners see it before they make an expensive mistake. Subscribe if you want the kind of honest, technical knowledge that puts you ahead of the problem instead of behind it. Drop a comment if you have ever dealt with rough shifting after a fluid change, because the answer to your story might be exactly what someone else is searching for right now. The most expensive maintenance mistake is not the one that breaks your car. It is the one that was almost right.